5 world titles, an MBE, and the most famous face darts has ever produced. Eric Bristow had all of it, and he dismantled most of it himself. Some of it went slowly, through a psychological condition that robbed him of his greatest years. The rest went in 40 minutes on Twitter on a Monday night in November 2016. To understand how that happened, you need to start at the beginning. Hackney, East London, the 25th of April, 1957. That's where Eric Bristow came from, the only child of a plasterer and a telephone operator, a kid whose father bought him a dartboard when he was 11. By 14, school had expelled him for carrying a claw hammer. By 17, England had capped him. By 23, he owned a world title. That first championship arrived in 1980 when he put Bobby George away 5 sets to 3, and after a first round shock loss in 1982 that his ego refused to process, he went on the most dominant run the sport had seen. 3 consecutive world championships between 1984 and 1986, dropping just 1 set across the entire 1984 tournament, finishing the 1986 final against Dave Whitcomb at 6 sets to 0. 5 world titles total, 5 World Masters titles, 4 WDF World Cup singles titles, world number 1 a record 5 times. Commentator Sid Waddell reached for history to describe it. When Alexander of Macedonia was 33, he cried salt tears because there were no more worlds to conquer. Eric Bristow is only 27. Darts historian Patrick Chaplin, who spent decades studying the sport, called him the greatest and most popular and hated darts player who ever lived. And that word hated was doing deliberate work because Bristow didn't merely beat you. Beating you wasn't enough. He wanted you to feel it. The nickname, the Crafty Cockney, came from a pub of that name in California that he visited in 1976, and it suited him. When people in pubs called him a flash git, his response was, "Yeah, I am. Then what they gonna do?" Journalist Jim Shelley spent time with him in the mid-80s and came away with this: a splendid bastard, a lump of arrogance, dumb pride, and rough honesty. Bristow accepted that framing without complaint. Before darts, there had been burglaries, car theft, and a street gang called the Hoxton Boys. That aggression never left him. Darts just gave it somewhere to go. November 1986, the Swedish Open, within 12 months of winning his 5th world title, and something went wrong at the oche. Bristow reached back to throw, and his arm refused to release the dart. Not nerves, not a rough night, not a slump. The arm simply would not obey the instruction his brain was sending: dartitis. The term had been coined only 5 years earlier in Darts World magazine by a writer named Robbie Dyson, but the condition itself was nothing new to elite sport. Sports psychologists now classify it as a form of task-specific focal dystonia, a neurological movement disorder where abnormal muscle contractions disrupt a precisely ingrained motion at the exact moment of execution. The word psychological gets attached to it, but that undersells what it actually does to a player, because the interruption occurs in the most fundamental circuitry of their game, the body refusing a command the brain has given thousands of times before. Bristow put it plainly in a 2007 interview with the Daily Telegraph. Your brain is saying, "For Christ's sake, let the thing go," and your arm won't go anywhere. It's embarrassing. The 1987 World Championship final came next, and Lowe beat him 4 sets to 6, ending 3 consecutive titles. The 1989 final arrived, and Jockey Wilson won it. Then came the 1990 final, dartitis still undefeated, and across the table sat Phil Taylor, a 125-1 outsider in his first World Championship, a man Bristow himself had funded and trained, who won 6 sets to 1. The 1991 final brought Dennis Priestley and a 6-0 scoreline, the most lopsided defeat of Bristow's career and his last televised final. Not another major title came after January 1986. Speaking on ITV's Sports Life Stories in 2013, Bristow described those years without sentimentality. "You feel like you're doomed. The game I love to play and used to be so easy to do, all of a sudden I can't even throw a dart. It slows down year after year and one day it just stops." 6 appearances at the World Match Play in Blackpool produced 0 wins. A brief, strange resurgence surfaced at the 1997 PDC World Championship semi-final, where he pushed Taylor to 5 sets before losing. Sky Sports called it his last hurrah. His final World Championship appearance came in 2000, 23 consecutive years after his first-round exit. No cure for dartitis exists. Partial recovery is the best most players can hope for. Bristow never got back to where he had been. The personality that made Bristow unbeatable was the same personality that made him exhausting to be around, and the record of documented incidents is long enough to take seriously. At a British International Championship in Scotland in 1982, the crowd turned hostile against him, and Darts World magazine described what followed as the most sustained barrage of jeering witnessed at a darts match. Bristow's response was to face the crowd after every treble 20, smile at them and invite more. Bobby George, who lost the 1980 World Championship final to him and competed alongside him for years, recalled in his memoir that on a trip to the United States, Bristow had pretended to wipe himself with the stars and stripes, causing considerable anxiety for everyone in the party. George's summary of the man: he couldn't keep his mouth shut, but he didn't care. John Lowe was his great rival, the methodical old stone face against Bristow's volatility, and they met 6 times in World Championship semi-finals and finals. Bristow's assessment of Lowe was characteristically ungenerous. All I had to do was play my normal game and I'd beat him every time because he can't go up a gear. Lowe's view of Bristow, offered after his death, ran in the opposite direction entirely. My rival, my partner, my friend. Both men were inducted together as the PDC Hall of Fame's inaugural members in 2005. Jockey Wilson brought the physical element. At the 1983 World Cup in Edinburgh, moments before their match, Wilson ran at Bristow and kicked him hard in the shin, removing, by Bristow's account, about 2 inches of skin. Bristow grabbed Wilson by the throat before 5 officials intervened. Wilson's explanation after Bristow won the match: "I've got to try to beat you somehow." They went to the bar together that evening. None of those relationships, though, carried the weight of what Bristow built with Phil Taylor. Spotting him playing county darts for Staffordshire in the late 80s, Bristow sponsored Taylor with around £10,000 of his own money, invited him to practice at his pub, and constructed a mentorship around a simple theory. If you find someone who is hungry for success but has nothing, you can train them because they'll be desperate to get out of whatever rut they're stuck in. Taylor at the time was unemployed and working with ceramics. The coaching style ran hard. If Taylor called to report a semi-final, Bristow would shout, "Only ring me when you've won," and hang up. That changed when Taylor beat him 6-1 in the 1990 World Championship final as a 125-1 outsider. Afterwards, Bristow told him, "You know what that means, don't you?" When Taylor said he didn't, Bristow replied, "I'm no good anymore." Taylor's words on that moment years later. "It broke me. It saddened me." Bristow later told Taylor his dominance was damaging the sport. "People are switching off, Phil. You're winning every year," and wrote in his autobiography that he had turned him into a monster. Taylor's tribute after Bristow's death cut straight through all of it. "Eric was like a brother to me. I loved him. I wouldn't have achieved what I did without him." Monday the 28th of November, 2016 is when it happened. A former Crewe Alexandra player named Andy Woodward had just publicly described being sexually abused as a youth player by convicted paedophile and coach Barry Bennell, and within days, more than 20 former footballers had come forward. Multiple police forces had opened investigations and the country was paying close attention. Bristow had approximately 93,000 followers on Twitter, and that evening he opened the app. The first tweet read, "Might be a loony, but if some football coach was touching me when I was a kid, as I got older, I would have went back and sorted that poof out." The second, "Dart players tough guys, footballers wimps." The third, "Bet the rugby boys are okay haha." The fourth, "You got to sort him out when you get older, or don't look in the mirror. Glad I am a dart player. Proper men." Backlash arrived immediately, and here's where it gets worse. Rather than pull back, Bristow posted that everyone on television was frightened to tell the truth and insisted he had been misread. The only retraction he offered was a single tweet that read, "Sorry meant pedo not poof," withdrawing the homophobic slur while defending everything else. 40 minutes of posting and a 30-year broadcasting career began to collapse. Steve Walters, one of Bennell's identified victims, responded directly, "Disgusted with Eric Bristow's remarks tonight. Stone Age mentality." Brian Moore, the former England rugby hooker who is himself a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, kept it brief. "I'm not even going to address the many reasons these tweets are wrong. I'll just say ignorance is no excuse for this idiocy." Survivors Manchester said they were appalled and asked police to investigate the posts as a homophobic hate crime. Survivors UK published a formal response stating that being a man does not protect you from post-traumatic stress, a sense of isolation, and fear of disbelief. By Tuesday morning, most of the tweets were gone. By Tuesday afternoon, Sky Sports had sacked him, issuing a statement that read, "He was a contributor to our darts coverage in the past, but we will not be using him in the future." Newcastle United dropped him from an upcoming Darts Legends event and said they would not work with him again. Other bookings and appearances fell away. The following morning, Bristow appeared on Good Morning Britain, told Piers Morgan and Susanna Reid that it was worded wrong and that he apologised for a miswording, then called Reid darling on air before Morgan stepped in. A written statement the same day compared himself to a bull in a china shop. None of that amounted to a retraction of what he actually believed. He continued in various interviews to suggest his real point had been that victims should come forward immediately rather than decades later. The apology was partial, and the underlying position never shifted. Bristow had married Jane Higginbotham in 1989, and in April 2005, a charge of assault arose from a drunken row at their home in Staffordshire. Bail was granted, the case went through the courts, and he was cleared of all charges. The marriage ended the same year after 16 years. A long relationship with Maureen Flowers, a women's darts champion, had preceded Jane. After the divorce, his partner was Rebecca Gadd, known as Bex, and she was with him at the end. He had spent years doing exhibitions, personal appearances, and whatever media work came after Sky, but the sacking had removed his most visible platform. Asked about money in a 2011 profile, he put it simply, "I've earned millions, but spent millions." His philosophy on the subject: there's not much point being the richest man in the graveyard. Thursday the 5th of April 2018, the Echo Arena in Liverpool, the Premier League darts event. Bristow had been working the corporate function, playing VIPs, doing meet and greets, the offstage darts economy he had lived in for years. That morning though, he had written in his diary, "Cold sweats, it feels like my heart is going to explode, don't like it, going to Echo." He went anyway. After finishing his duties, he collapsed. A heart attack killed him in Liverpool. 60 years old, 20 days from his 61st birthday. Bobby George had seen him that afternoon in a pub across from the arena. He just came in, said hello, had a pint, then said see ya. Bex Gadd told Sky Sports, "It's so Eric to say the show must go on. He lived for darts and sadly died for it too." Inside the Echo Arena, the crowd sang, "There's only one Eric Bristow," and players on stage were visibly shaken. Keith Deller, who had beaten Bristow in the 1983 World Championship final and absorbed Bristow's criticism in his autobiography, told the crowd, "If it wasn't for Eric, no one would be here tonight." Phil Taylor said he was lost for words and really devastated, calling Bristow a huge influence and a larger-than-life character. Barry Hearn called him a legend in the world of darts and British sport. John Lowe came back to those three words: my rival, my partner, my friend. The PDC renamed the Grand Slam of Darts trophy the Eric Bristow Trophy. 29 years old. That's how old Bristow was when dartitis showed up at the Swedish Open and ended the greatest version of his career. 30 years of exhibitions, of diminished competition, of nurturing Phil Taylor into a player who surpassed him entirely, of a punditry career that filled the space where dominance used to live. And then a Monday night in November 2016, approximately 40 minutes on Twitter, and much of what remained of that reputation came apart. The tweets did not arrive from nowhere. They came from the exact same place as everything else controversial Bristow had ever done. From a deep-settled conviction that he was telling the truth other people were too afraid to say. That conviction had travelled with him from Hackney to 5 world titles to a television studio and finally to a phone in his hand, and it served him brilliantly until the night it finished him. Patrick Chaplin, who studied the sport for decades, described him as the greatest and most popular and hated darts player who ever lived. And that combination was never accidental. The confidence that made Bristow unbeatable, the arrogance that generated enemies wherever he went, the contempt for weakness that cost him his Sky Sports role, it all traced back to one source. The PDC renamed its most prestigious non-world championship trophy after him. The fans in Liverpool sang his name while people on stage cried. Whether the restoration of his reputation was warranted is a question each person watching this will answer on their own. What nobody disputes is the scale of what he built, or how thoroughly he participated in pulling it down.